The first subsidy is gone.
Good day, Legendary Joe. The last time I came here, we discussed about politics. Today, I want us to discuss about the economy. My question for you today is, if Tinubu did not remove fuel subsidy, where would Nigeria be now?
Thank you, Franklin, for coming again. I appreciate this subject. It's important, it's relevant, it's topical because it's our current realities. It is, however, also sensitive. Sensitive to the extent that it's the painful realities of the common man today. What our current experiences in the global economy, particularly the crisis in the Middle East, impacts directly on the lives of the people. We cannot wish that. That's why when those that speak for government, either as spokespersons or stakeholders of this administration, I usually encourage and urge all of us that in defending the policies of the government, or even in promoting the achievements of this administration, we must not dismiss the pains of the people. We cannot wish the people's lived experiences away. Our oratory or our power of elocution is not sufficient enough to replace the realistic and practical agony of the people as it concerns the economy of the pockets. Correct. A fellow who earned 100,000 prior to the crisis of the Middle East, say last month, say February, his budget on fuel or transport may be 30,000. To and fro his place of work, to and fro his place of worship, to and fro his place of vocation. 30,000 naira may have been his budget on transportation of fuel, as the case may be. That's 30% of his income. That was when fuel was 650, 700, correct? Now that it's 13, 1213, depending on location, his budgets for fuel would have now been forced to increase. Not because he's traveling a longer distance, not because he's going to more locations than before, but because there's a crisis currently. You understand? There's a crisis currently the world is going through that has now compelled him to increase his budget from 30,000 to 50,000. 50% of his budget now goes into transportation. So whatever is left is what we expect him to undo is the rest of his needs with. Definitely something must suffer in his necessities, correct? So the opportunity cost will now become fuel when there are several other needs that he needs to contend with. So we cannot wish their realities away. But in attending to this conversation or discussion of this nature, which is very sensitive, for it touches the economy of the people, is to ensure that we present what the circumstances are vis-a-vis the facts, the truths, and the practicality of the policies, to prove almost beyond doubt that, look, as terrible the situation we are currently, it could have been much worse if certain actions were not taken before now. If the leadership of this country at this moment did not have the foresight and the courage to act when they acted in May 29, 2023 by removing the subsidy. So that background set, where we have acknowledged the pains of the people in terms of the spike in the pump price of fuel, is now to balance the other side of it, saying our situation is neither peculiar, our situation is neither the fault of the government of the day, and our situation could have been worse if subsidy as of 2023 was not removed. Now we'll move to the subject, the meat of the conversation. And in moving to it, I have to prove to our people, I have to first clarify to our people that I am first a citizen. Because when we speak, they say, you people do not feel the pains of the people. Yeah, you guys are being fed by taxpayers' money. For some of us, it's not true, In positions we hold, many of those that complain today may even be earning much more than we do. We go to the same market, don't we? Our children don't school in space. They school amongst us in the society. If they increase school fees, we are equally going to bear the burden of that. So we are speaking. I particularly am speaking first as a citizen before any other thing. Because at the end of the day, we are all victims of the global crisis. Now, subsidy. The president pronounced it removed May 29, 2023. But the fact the people may not have realized is that prior to 2023, the then government of President Muhammadu Buhari, after passing the PIA bill, had introduced to law that come June 1st, 2023, subsidy must go. What we praise Tinubu for is not the removal. He didn't remove it. Let's just get that straight. What we praise him for his courage to see it through and not go back on the law, because he had every right to say he wants to amend that law. He has every right to say, okay, no, it can't be now. Our politicians, our leaders, many times they fail, not for not knowing what to do, but lacking the will to do it. Because they will sacrifice the common good, the general good, on the altars of popularity and clout, so to speak. The year that preceded 2023, which was 2022, the budgetary allocation for subsidy was 443 billion naira. Correct? Yes. But later on, the government, considering the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the government had to increase the allocation for it to what? 4.39 trillion naira. From 443 billion. Now, 4.39 trillion was allocated for fuel subsidy alone. The total budget for that year, I'm talking total budget, the entire funds allocated for expenditure, both capital and recurrent, to keep this economy going was 17 trillion naira. Now, 4.39 allocated for fuel would be 20%, 1/5 of that total budget, at least. Correct? Now, when you put it in context, you will realize that the budget for health at that time, that material time, the budget for health, which includes the recurrent in health sector, which includes the capital project in oil sector, health sector, and whatever it will require to keep the health sector going, was 711 billion, 4.2% of the total budget. Oil subsidy was 20%. The budget for education, and we all agree that the bedrock of any nation's development is education, correct? Because when you educate a child, you train a generation, correct? Because that is how you then build leaders to take over, future leadership. Now, the budget for education at that time was 1.3 trillion naira. The budget for infrastructure, and when I say infrastructure, I use it in the umbrella terms. That is where works falling. That is where transport falling. That is where power falling. And everything that requires capital projects, your roads, your rail, investment in power sector to keep the bulbs on. The budget for the entire infrastructure sector at the time was 1.45 trillion. The budget for housing, to keep people off the street, to give a better life to civil servants, public servants, and those on the lower rung of the ladder, and ensure that we do not have people sleeping on the streets, under the bridges, that end up becoming criminals. The budget for housing was 500 billion naira. The sum total of these four critical sectors, the sum total of these four critical sectors was 3.97 trillion naira. Oil fuel subsidy was 4.39 trillion. That is where we're coming from. Now, I stand to be corrected, anybody. There are many countries that also subsidize one thing or the other, don't they? I want anybody to check the books of these countries and tell me where subsidy on one component, subsidy on one commodity or one component requires 20% of that nation's budget. Unlikely. Unlikely. That is aside the fact that there are other subsidies we enjoyed then, we still enjoy now. Subsidies, the subsidy on our electricity, even now. The subsidy on education, we are not paying as high school fees as many nations. The subsidy, even on our health sector, correct? That is why you must have heard the news where people relocate now to attend to their health. It's far cheaper in Nigeria than many nations. Other subsidies aside, I said oil subsidy on fuel was taking 20% of the nation's budget at the time. 4.39 trillion. So if such subsidy persists, what do you think the situation will be now? It will mean that in the light of the current crisis, I'm not taking into consideration that we would have paid subsidy in 2022, 2023, paid in 2024, paid in 2025, and then now, correct? Now that there is crisis. Now, in the light of this crisis, fuel would most likely rise far higher than it rose in 2022 because this crisis is very unique, correct? Therefore, we will not be spending 4.3 trillion naira today to subsidize. Because 4.3 trillion naira in 2022 was approximately $10 billion. Let's even assume the $10 billion remain constant. That would be 13 trillion naira today. Now, if that be the case, and government is still forced to meet the difference, because subsidy is when you put a price cap, you put a cap on the price of a commodity and you pay the difference, government pay the difference, correct? Now, if government still continues to pay that subsidy, the minimum we'll be paying today is 13 trillion. Today, the government suffers from revenue fall, such that they cannot even meet certain capital obligations. So, it will mean that we will have a fiscal system that is badly battered. Our treasury will be like a calabash with a large hole underneath. No matter how you fill it, it won't get full. You won't be able to take anything out of it. Now, the second reality we'll be facing now is that we have to realize that without subsidy living, without subsidy going, like Tinubu put it in 2023, subsidy is gone. Dangote refinery would never have launched for production. And if it did, it will not be supplying the Nigerian market. Because Dangote as a private company, private establishment, private enterprise, will not be competing in a subsidized market. Go and check every nation where they have local refineries. Most of those nations, there's no subsidy on that commodity. All right. So if Dangote does not launch for production, or is not supplying the Nigerian market because subsidy is a major competition to him, what do you think will happen with fuel scarcity? Because we will now be at the mercy of the importers. And these importers that we know that when there is even no crisis, they are always after. They are more like termites, they are cankerworms. They are greedy opportunists. Importers, they seek the slightest opportunity to exploit. Now, with 13 trillion being the burden to fix subsidy, the government will definitely be falling short, and importers will be taking advantage, and then we have kilometer-long queues. We have had such situations before when there was no crisis. In a regular global situation, importers owed this country by the jugular and demanded ransom. I'm not going to go into the reasons why subsidy was removed in its entire form. I'm speaking to the issue which you have brought, saying if it has persisted, where are we going to be? Otherwise, I would have also mentioned that that at the time, we're not subsidizing only this markets, we're subsidizing the sub-region, because importers, in their parasitic nature, were taking our subsidized fuel to neighboring countries and selling there at a premium. So we're subsidizing not just Nigeria, but Cotonou, but Togo, but Ghana, and every other nation that depended on this source. Now we say the fuel is expensive, correct? And truly it's expensive. But what we would have seen if we didn't remove subsidy is not just the price hike, it's that it won't be available. Now, 1.3 per liter, I assume, at black market rates, when people begin to seize advantage, 10,000 may not afford you a liter. That's the reality. Over 100 nations today have increased the fuel price of fuel at gas stations. Over 100 nations. The proportion may be different. But we had the foresight to ensure that we are not in the situation of many countries. Today, many countries are rationing. You cannot buy more than 30 liters. 20 liters is the highest. In fact, you don't go out this week because they're finding ways to see how the fuel can go round. Am I correct? Now, the third reason would have been we also observing and considering what our debt situation would be. In 2022, leading to 2023, before Tinubu took over, due to subsidy as one of the major reasons, our debt to revenue was already 97%. Meaning for every 100 naira this country earns as revenue, we paid 97 naira as debt servicing. It's 3 naira for whatever else you want to, your capital, your salaries, your current, your development, your whatever. 3 naira for every 100 naira. You understand? And that is why Buhari government had to resort to ways and means, because we exceeded our borrowing threshold. Correct? So we began to print money. Now imagine subsidy was sustained for that time. And then we have this crisis that we're currently going through. It will mean that we'll borrow even much more heavily. And when we do, what happens? We'll also meet our threshold. Then we'll have to go back, repeat the same process that brought us here, the same actions that brought us here. We begin to print money in ways and means. And then that will lead to inflation. Your naira will grow weaker. There will be general frustrations within the economy. Much worse, in more significant proportion that no textbook may be able to define. Then the last one would have been political pressure. You see, the first time subsidy, the campaign for subsidy removal, the first time we heard of it in very strong terms in this country was 1986. Whoever was born in 1986 is 40 today, 40 years ago. That was the first time the government knew this fuel subsidy would ruin us. The government of IBB during the SAP. And that was when he moved the fuel from, I think he moved it to 4 naira from 50 kobo. Thereabout. I'll get the figures right. From 1986, every leader had been avoiding. They know, in fact, it forms some of their campaign promises. We will remove subsidy. They know it's a challenge. They know it's a parasite. They know it is a pestilence. They know it is parasitic on our economy. And if it's sustained, it will hamper on our development and advancement. But who will bear the cat? Like I said earlier, it's not enough to know the problem. Our politicians, most leaders always know. But who amongst them will have the courage, will have even the liberty, the leadership stamina to want to sacrifice his popularity, to want to sacrifice his political capital on the altar of economic expediency? So all of them had been postponing it even till Buhari was a general. Now, if we did remove it then, now there's the pressures in terms of the fiscal and financial pressures, economic pressures we would have faced because of the global crisis. Now we will be forced, because we will not have a choice now, than to remove it. If we now remove it at this time, let's assume we have kept the price at 620. We now remove it now. And fuel becomes, no. How much was fuel at 2023 pre-removal? 120, 140, 150, correct? Let's say 200. If fuel was 200 then, and we remove it now, and fuel goes from 200 to 13, what do you think will happen? In the light of this opportunistic opposition, who are currently clueless and do not know what path and how to get at the ruling party, do not know the winning formula to use, they will seize advantage. And with the anger of the people at Optima, they will march on the streets. And no barrier is going to stop them, because you have from 200 to 13. That's about 600, 700% increase at a go, because now you will not have a choice. Now, the worst time to remove subsidy on anything is in a time of crisis. But because you didn't remove it at the nearest best time, you are forced to do it now. You will not be able to cope with the consequences. So, in the light of this, we realize that our 2026 budget, for example, is 58 trillion naira. The revenue is 34 trillion. Like I mentioned, if the deficit is 23 trillion, if subsidy had persisted, it would have been 13 trillion of a deficit of 23 trillion. Then it means it would have the difference would have come from borrowing, correct? In simple terms, this government had managed to keep the students in school, no strike. The government has managed to keep doctors in hospitals, no strike. Am I correct? This government has managed to see significant projects going on. This government has managed to keep many things we have always seen as the norm in terms of strikes and lack. They have managed to keep it going. But this government also does not have a bottomless pit of revenue or funds. Today, contractors are still complaining. Some of them have not been paid. Some of our items on the capital items on our budget have not been funded, because we are simply not a rich country. I think we have to correct that impression, because Nigeria, with all the money we Nigeria get, we are not a rich country. The entire budget of Nigeria is not up to one state in USA. So we are a potentially rich country. And if you are a potentially rich country, if we evolve from the realm of potentials to reality, you must not act and behave like you are a rich country. Even the richest countries no longer do fuel subsidy. So why you, a struggling nation? So I think one of the best decisions the Asiwaju administration has made is to remove the subsidy, because it averted a much worse consequences. One, this country may not have survived if it persisted till now. So thank you so much for having me. I hope we are able to say we do not disregard the hardship and the economic pressures on the people, on the common man today, but in the light of education, in the light of information, in the light of historic comparison, we say we are in a much better situation than we would have been if certain actions were not taken, particularly subsidy removal.